John ambled through the serene meadows that sprawled around the edges of the city, his thoughts as calm as the quiet earth beneath his feet. Once a battlefield, this planet had transformed into a peaceful nexus for diplomacy and learning, a testament to humanity's capacity for change, a subject he now taught at the local university. The rustle of the autumn leaves broke his reverie. As he adjusted his path around a particularly dense thicket, a sharp, unnatural glint caught his eye. Curiosity piqued, John ventured closer, only to stumble upon the smoldering remains of what appeared to be a spacecraft. He froze, his instincts from days long past kicking in. The craft was small, likely a scout ship, and it was badly damaged. Smoke billowed from its fractured hull, painting the clear sky with ominous strokes. His heart raced, but his mind was clear. He knew what he had to do. John cautiously approached the wreckage, scanning for movement. He wasn't alone. "Hello? Is anyone there?" he called out, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. From within the twisted metal, a weak groan responded. John, trained for this, moved swiftly, his old skills resurfacing as he navigated through the debris. Inside, he found her, Mira, though he didn't know her name yet. She was unconscious, her form delicate and clearly non-human, her skin shimmering with a subtle luminescence. He checked for injuries, his hands expertly assessing her condition without causing further harm. She was alive but in bad shape. Not wasting a moment, John gently lifted her from the wreckage and carried her back towards the city. His mind raced with plans to get her the help she needed. As he walked, he activated his communicator. "Alex, come in. I need medical at my location, stat. Alien, possibly critical." He spoke into the device. Alex, his colleague and an experienced medic, responded promptly. "On it, John. Keep her stable. I'm on my way." Minutes felt like hours until Alex arrived with a hover stretcher and a medical kit. Together, they secured Mira onto the stretcher, Alex taking over with the precision of a seasoned professional. "She's stable for now, but we need to get her to the hospital," Alex updated as they loaded her onto the vehicle. John nodded, his gaze never leaving the alien girl's face. As they sped towards the city, John reflected on his vow to never wield weapons again. He had left that life behind, or so he thought. Now, fate had thrown him back into the fray, albeit in a different capacity. He looked at Mira, her breathing shallow yet peaceful, and felt a resolve awaken within him. At the hospital, they were met by Dr. Lena, the head of alien physiology. "What happened?" she asked as they wheeled Mira in. "Crash landed outside the city. She needs help," John explained quickly, stepping back to let the experts work. Lena glanced at him, her expression serious yet kind. "We'll take it from here, John. You've done enough." As the medical team whisked Mira away, John stood in the bustling hospital corridor, the sounds of urgent footsteps and distant machines filling the air. Alex clapped him on the shoulder. "You did good, John. Let's grab some coffee. You look like you could use it." John managed a small smile, his mind still with the alien girl. "Yeah, coffee sounds good," he replied, but his thoughts were already racing ahead, wondering about the girl from the stars and what her arrival meant for his peaceful life. Chapter 2: The Awakening. In the sterile quiet of the hospital's specialized alien recovery ward, Mira slowly regained consciousness. The room, designed to mimic the environmental conditions of various extraterrestrial habitats, bathed in a soft, bioluminescent glow that was comforting and familiar to her species. John and Alex waited anxiously outside the observation glass, watching as Dr. Lena monitored Myra's vital signs. The digital displays flickered with alien script, incomprehensible to the human eye but clearly indicating improvement. "She's stabilizing," Lena informed them, stepping out of the room. "Her physiology is fascinating, similar to ours in some ways but radically different in others." John nodded, his curiosity piqued. "Can we talk to her? Will she understand us?" "We can try," Lena replied. "Our translation tech has been updating with her language data since she arrived. It should be functional now." They entered the recovery room cautiously, the door whooshing shut behind them. Myra's eyes fluttered open, taking in her surroundings and the three humans by her side. "Hello, Mira," John began, his voice gentle. "I'm John, and this is Alex and Dr. Lena. You're safe here." Mira looked at him, her eyes widening in understanding and fear. "Where am I?" Her voice was melodic, each word resonating slightly, as if carried by a soft breeze. "You're on Earth," Lena explained. "You had an accident, and John found you. We've been taking care of you." Myra's tension eased slightly, her gaze settling on John. "Thank you," she said, her voice carrying a warmth that belied her frail appearance. John smiled. "You're welcome. Can you tell us where you're from?" "I am from Yalara," she responded. "I was exploring this sector when my ship malfunctioned." Alex, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. "We'd like to help you get back home if that's what you wish." Mira nodded. "I would appreciate that, but I need to contact my people. They will be worried." "We can assist with that," Lena added. "But first, we need to ensure you're fully recovered." As they spoke, another figure approached the recovery room. A man in a sleek suit, his expression serious. "Dr. Lena, a moment, please," he said, gesturing for her to come outside. Lena excused herself and stepped out with the man, who John recognized as Richard, the director of the hospital. Inside, John, Alex, and Mira continued their conversation, slowly bridging the gap between their worlds. Mira described Yalara, a planet of vast oceans and floating cities, her descriptions painting vivid pictures in John's mind. Meanwhile, Lena returned, looking somewhat concerned. "That was Richard. He's informed the United Earth government about Mira. They want to meet her, ensure she's no threat." John frowned, his protective instincts flaring. "She's no threat. She's just lost and needs help." "I agree," Lena said firmly. "But we need to play this carefully, for her sake and ours." They all nodded, understanding the delicate situation. Turning back to Mira, Lena smiled reassuringly. "We'll sort everything out. For now, rest and heal." As the day waned, John and Alex decided to leave, promising to return the next day. They walked down the hospital corridors, their steps echoing lightly. "Seems like old times, huh?" Alex remarked, a hint of nostalgia in his voice. John chuckled. "Yeah, except this time we're saving aliens, not chasing them." Their laughter filled the hall, a sound of camaraderie and newfound purpose as they stepped out into the cool evening air, the city lights twinkling like distant stars, reminding them of the vast universe beyond and the new friends they made within it. Chapter 3, First Contact. Mira sat upright on her recovery cot, the soft hum of the medical monitors blending with the faint chatter outside the glass walls. The alien girl's complexion had regained its subtle glow, her eyes more alert now as she absorbed the unfamiliar surroundings. John and Alex entered, their expressions calm and welcoming. John carried a steaming cup of coffee, while Alex held a tablet displaying diagrams and maps. They approached Mira, who regarded them curiously. "Good morning," John greeted, his voice warm. "How are you feeling today?" "Better," Mira replied softly, her words measured but clear. "Thank you for helping me. It is different here." Alex nodded, his casual demeanor putting Mira more at ease. "Different good, I hope. We're glad you're recovering so well. Have you remembered anything else about what caused the crash?" Mira hesitated, her hands resting lightly on her lap. "There was a storm, a fluctuation in the energy flow of my ship. It was sudden, unexpected. I could not control it." John took a sip of coffee, then set the cup down. "We were looking over the wreckage yesterday. Your ship is pretty advanced, beyond anything we've seen before. It must have been quite a storm to bring it down." "I do not think it was a natural storm," Mira said, her gaze meeting theirs. "It felt artificial, as if someone wanted to force me down." Alex raised an eyebrow. "That's a pretty serious claim. Do you think someone was targeting you?" "I do not know," Mira admitted. "It is only a feeling." The room fell into a contemplative silence before John spoke again. "Well, feeling or not, we'll look into it. But first, I think it's time we learned more about you and your people." Mira hesitated, then nodded. What would you like to know? John exchanged a glance with Alex. Why don't we start simple? Alex said. What kind of place is Yalara? A small smile flickered across Myra's face. Yalara is beautiful. It is a world of vast oceans. Our cities float upon them, connected by light paths and energy bridges. We live in harmony with the waters, drawing power from the currents and the sunlight. John leaned forward, genuinely intrigued. Floating cities? That sounds incredible. How do you keep them stable? We have anchors, Mira explained. They sink deep into the ocean floor, creating balance. And our technology adjusts for the waves, so we remain steady even during storms. Usually, Alex chuckled. We've got a lot of floating platforms back on Earth, mostly for research and energy. But nothing like that. Your whole civilization lives that way. Yes, Mira said, her voice softening. We have no land-based settlements. Everything we do, everything we are, is tied to the water. It shapes our culture, our way of life. Even our language is fluid. John tilted his head. Fluid. Mira nodded. It shifts. Our words carry different meanings depending on tone, rhythm, even the time of day. We have fewer fixed words than you. It is why your language feels so solid to me. That's fascinating, Alex said, pulling up his tablet. Would you be willing to teach us a few phrases? I'd love to learn how you say hello or thank you. Myra's smile grew a little brighter. Of course. Hello is Vowed, spoken softly, with a rise at the end. And thank you is Tirin, with a downward tone. John tried it out. Vowed Tirin. Did I get that right? Close, Mira said, laughing lightly. But you must relax your voice. Like this, Vowed. John and Alex repeated after her, laughing at their own mistakes. The atmosphere shifted, becoming lighter, friendlier. Myra's eyes seemed to sparkle as she guided them through a few more words, her hands moving gracefully as she explained the nuances. For the first time, John saw a glimpse of who she was beyond the injured stranger in a strange land. She was a teacher, a cultural guide, and someone eager to share her world. That realization brought a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. After a while, Alex stretched and set down the tablet. All right, I think I need a break before my brain gets overloaded. John, you got this. John nodded. I'll stick around a bit longer. Alex gave a mock salute. Good luck, he said, grinning as he left the room. John turned back to Mira. You've got a pretty impressive way of explaining things. Ever done this before? Mira looked thoughtful. Not exactly. I am not a teacher by trade, but in my role as a historian, I have often told stories of our past, our traditions. Perhaps it is similar. A historian, huh? John said. That's interesting. I've always had a soft spot for history. What's one of your favorite stories from Yalara's past? Myra's expression grew more animated. There is a tale we tell of the first explorers, our ancestors who built the first floating cities. They were guided by the stars and the currents, working together to create something that would last for generations. Sounds like a story worth hearing, John said. Why don't you tell me about them? And so Mira began. Her voice wove the story of Yalara's early days, of the explorers who braved uncharted waters, of the alliances they formed and the technologies they developed. John listened intently, his mind painting vivid pictures of the alien world as Mira spoke. He found himself drawn not only to the content of her story but to the way she told it, the lilt of her voice, the spark of passion in her eyes. It was a reminder that even among the stars, people shared a common thread, the desire to understand their roots and pass that knowledge on to others. As the day wore on, the gap between human and alien narrowed. They laughed, shared questions and answers, and began to build a bridge of understanding. For John, it was a new kind of mission, one that didn't require weapons or conflict, only an open mind and a willingness to learn. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, he felt more connected to Mira and her world than he ever thought possible. And in that moment, he realized that this was only the beginning. Chapter 4. cultural crossroads. The grand hall gleamed like a jewel, its ceiling a lattice of glowing panels that mirrored the vibrant energy of the gathering below. Representatives from dozens of planets mingled, their unique attire and languages forming a tapestry of diversity. For John, it was a sensory overload. For Mira, it was a chance to bring him deeper into her world. "Are you sure I won't embarrass you here?" John murmured as they entered the hall. His plain suit was a stark contrast to the elaborate robes and iridescent garments around him. Mira smiled, a teasing glint in her luminous eyes. "You'll be fine. Just keep your head up and try not to step on anyone's tails." Tails? Her laugh was soft, musical. "You'll see." They strolled past groups of aliens engaged in lively conversations. One being, with long, feather-like scales, gestured animatedly with its 4 arms. Another, resembling a cluster of floating orbs, pulsed in rhythmic patterns that John assumed were a form of speech. The sheer variety was both mesmerizing and slightly intimidating. John leaned closer to Mira. "What exactly is this event?" "It's a cultural exchange," Mira explained. "Each year, delegates from member planets showcase their art, music, and traditions. It's a celebration of unity and mutual understanding." "Sounds like a lot of politics mixed with entertainment," John remarked, his tone light. "Sometimes," Mira admitted, "but it's also a chance to learn and share. I thought you might enjoy seeing my people's traditions firsthand." As they walked, Mira pointed out a display from Yalara, a stunning arrangement of shimmering aquatic sculptures that seemed to flow and shift like living water. The shapes told a story of her world's origins, from the first floating cities to their modern interconnected society. "These are incredible," John said, his voice full of awe. "I've never seen anything like it." "They're made from crystallized ocean currents," Mira explained. "It's a rare art form. Only a few artisans on Yalara can create them." John studied the delicate figures, marveling at the way they caught the light. "So, what's the story behind these?" Mira stepped closer, her voice lowering slightly. "They depict the journey of the first explorers, those who ventured across the endless seas to establish our first floating cities. Each piece represents a key moment in their journey." John listened intently, his curiosity growing. "I'd love to hear the whole story someday." "You will," Mira promised. As they moved on, John noticed how others reacted to Mira. Some delegates greeted her warmly, recognizing her as a respected historian. Others gave her wary glances, their expressions guarded. It was clear that, even in a gathering meant to foster understanding, old suspicions and prejudices lingered. At one point, they were approached by an elderly Yalaran delegate, her robes adorned with intricate shell patterns. She regarded John with sharp, assessing eyes. "Mira, I see you've brought a human guest." "This is John," Mira said, introducing him with a warm smile. "He's been helping me recover since my crash." The elder's expression softened slightly, though her tone remained formal. "A noble gesture. I hope you find our culture enlightening, John." "I already have," John replied sincerely. "Myra's been a great teacher." The elder nodded, her gaze shifting between them. "Good. Understanding leads to trust, and trust is what we need more of." As she departed, John turned to Mira. "Not everyone here seems thrilled about humans." Mira sighed. "It's not personal. Some of our people have concerns about human intentions. Your history of conflict, your rapid expansion, it makes them uneasy." John nodded slowly. "Fair enough. I can't blame them for being cautious. But that's why I'm here, right? To show them we're not all bad." Mira smiled again, her luminous eyes meeting his. "And you're doing a good job of that." They continued through the hall, stopping to watch a performance of Yalaran wave dancing. The dancers moved as if carried by unseen tides, their movements fluid and mesmerizing. John found himself drawn to the rhythm, feeling an unexpected connection to the alien art form. "Do you dance like that?" he asked Mira. "Not as well as they do," she admitted. "But I could teach you a few basic steps, if you're brave enough." John chuckled. "Brave enough?" I faced plenty of challenges in my time, but dancing might be the toughest yet. Mira laughed, her voice blending with the music. I'll take that as a yes. As the evening progressed, they encountered other human delegates, some of whom were surprised to see John in such close company with a Yalaran historian. While most were polite, a few couldn't hide their skepticism. John handled their questions diplomatically, his words calm and measured. One human official pulled him aside. John, are you sure about this? Getting so close to her. She's a friend, John replied firmly, and a brilliant historian. If we can't even get to know each other, what's the point of these exchanges? The official frowned but said nothing more, leaving John to rejoin Mira. She noticed the exchange and gave him a questioning look. Just a little human politics, he said with a shrug. Mira nodded, understanding more than he expected. It's the same everywhere. Fear of the unknown. Then maybe we can change that, John said. One step at a time. They shared a quiet moment before moving on. The night was filled with new sights, sounds, and conversations, each one weaving a stronger bond between them. By the end of the event, John felt not only closer to Mira, but also more determined to bridge the gaps between their worlds. As they left the hall, Mira glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. You handled yourself well tonight. Thanks, John said. But I've got a good guide. Mira's smile returned, softer this time. Perhaps, but you're the one walking the path. Together, they stepped out into the cool night air, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, side by side. Chapter 5: The Conflict. John adjusted his collar, trying to brush off the unease that had settled over him. The day's mission was straightforward. Help Mira arrange the final details for a transmission that could reach her people. No combat, no old reflexes surfacing. Just diplomacy and a clear head. That's what he kept telling himself, anyway. I thought this was going to be easy, John muttered as he stepped into the communications center, where Mira was already working at a sleek terminal. The room hummed softly, rows of alien. Mira glanced up, her eyes showing a mix of relief and determination. Didn't anyone tell you? Nothing is easy when it comes to interstellar politics. He chuckled, walking over to stand beside her. If that's your way of making me feel better, it's not working. Mira grinned briefly before turning back to the screen. This relay should be strong enough to reach Yalara. We just need to calibrate the frequency and... She stopped suddenly, her fingers hovering above the controls. A faint, rhythmic pulse flashed across the screen. What is it? John leaned in, frowning. That doesn't look like a normal signal. It's not, Mira confirmed, her voice tightening. It's an interference pattern, deliberate. Deliberate as in, someone's trying to stop you? John asked, the hairs on his neck standing on end. Maybe not stop, but definitely disrupt, Mira said. This is more sophisticated than a natural anomaly. It's likely a targeted jamming signal. John's brow furrowed. Why would someone want to block your message? Mira hesitated, her gaze fixed on the screen. Yalara isn't as isolated as it once was. There are factions, external and internal, who see us as a valuable target. They'd have reason to interfere with a direct communication. And you didn't think to mention this before? John asked, not accusing, just surprised. I didn't think it would matter here, Mira admitted. Earth seemed neutral enough. John nodded slowly, thinking it through. Okay, so what's our move? Can we get around the jamming? Possibly, Mira said. But I'll need your help. Sure. What do you need me to do? Mira motioned to a nearby console. That terminal can access the relay's hardware settings. I need you to manually adjust the signal strength while I try to redirect the transmission through an alternate band. John moved to the other console and examined the controls. I was hoping this would be more about watching pretty holograms and less about technical jargon. Mira smiled faintly. Welcome to my world. Ready? Ready as I'll ever be, John replied, rolling up his sleeves. Mira began typing commands into her terminal. Increase the signal strength by 10%. John followed her instructions, his fingers a bit clumsy at first. Like this. Yes. Good. Mira said without looking up. Now we need to find a clear frequency. Try switching to the next channel and then boost the gain again. Next channel, got it? John said, his hands moving more confidently now. How many channels are there? Dozens, Mira replied. Just keep going until we find one that isn't disrupted. They worked in tandem, their quiet focus punctuated by occasional murmurs. Mira's voice carried a calm authority that steadied John, even as the task grew more complex. For a brief moment he felt a faint echo of his old self, the man who thrived under pressure, who knew how to stay cool and get the job done. But this time it wasn't about fighting or surviving. It was about helping someone who had become important to him. Channel 24 looks promising, John said after several tries. Should I hold it here? Yes, Mira said, her voice gaining a hopeful edge. Hold it steady while I lock the transmission. John did as she instructed, keeping his attention fixed on the console. How's it looking on your end? The signal's stabilizing, Mira said. We might actually pull this off. They exchanged a quick glance, a flicker of shared determination passing between them. For a few more minutes they worked silently, adjusting parameters and monitoring the relay's output. Finally, Mira exhaled in relief. It's done. The message is on its way. John leaned back, his shoulders relaxing. Not bad for a couple of amateurs. Mira smiled, a light laugh escaping her. Amateurs? I'd say we're a pretty good team. You know, John said, leaning casually against the console. If this historian thing doesn't work out, you might have a future as a communications engineer. Don't push it, Mira replied, but she was still smiling. As they stood there, catching their breath, John felt a shift in the air between them. The tension of the moment was gone, replaced by something more personal, more real. Mira looked at him, her luminous eyes searching his face. Thank you, she said quietly. I couldn't have done this alone. You're welcome, John replied, his voice equally soft. I'm just glad I could help. Mira hesitated, then took a small step closer. John, Before she could finish, the room's lights flickered, and a low warning tone sounded from one of the consoles. Mira turned back to the screen, her expression tense again. Something's not right. The relay's output is spiking. John's instincts kicked in. Spiking? What does that mean? It means we might have triggered a countermeasure, Mira said, her hands flying over the controls. This signal, it's feeding back into the system. Can you stop it? John asked, moving to her side. I'm trying, Mira said, her voice tight. But if we don't shut it down, it could overload the entire network. John looked around, his mind racing. Tell me what to do. Mira glanced at him, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. There's a manual override panel by the door. If you can reset the power flow, I can stabilize the relay. Without hesitation, John moved to the panel and began working the controls. It was a tense few minutes, but eventually, the warning tone stopped, and the lights returned to normal. Mira sighed in relief. You did it. Like I said, pretty good team, John replied, his grin returning. But inside, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much larger than either of them had anticipated. Chapter 6. The Turning Point. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of the research center, illuminating the scattered equipment and charts that now seemed like relics of a battle they hadn't expected to fight. John stood with a hand on his hip, looking over the console that had caused them so much trouble the day before. Mira sat on the edge of a nearby workbench, arms folded, her expression distant. You didn't sleep much, did you? John said, turning to her. Mira shook her head. Not really. I've been replaying the events in my mind, trying to understand why someone would go to these lengths. Any theories? She glanced at him, her luminous eyes reflecting both uncertainty and determination. Several. None of them good. John leaned against the console. Let's hear the worst one. Mira sighed. It's possible that the interference wasn't just an isolated act of sabotage. If it's coming from the same faction that's been pressuring my people back home, this might be part of a larger effort to cut off our communications completely. Isolate us, make us vulnerable. John frowned, considering her words. If that's true, what's the endgame? Control, Mira said simply. If they can isolate us and spread disinformation, they can influence public opinion. Turn allies against us, weaken us from within. John nodded slowly. Classic strategy. We've seen it before. Divide, isolate, destabilize. But I didn't think anyone out there was using tactics that underhanded. There are always those who believe their goals justify any means, Mira said quietly. That's why we have to stop them. The room fell silent for a moment as John weighed their next steps. Finally, he pushed off the console and started pacing. All right, if they're playing dirty, we've got to be smarter. We can't just react. We need to get ahead of this. Mira tilted her head. What do you have in mind? Well, John said, motioning to the equipment around them. We're sitting on a treasure trove of data here. If we can pinpoint where the interference is coming from, we might be able to trace it back to its source. Find out who's behind it and why. Mira nodded thoughtfully. That would mean accessing classified relay logs. Could be risky. John smirked. Risk is part of the job, isn't it? Your job, maybe, Mira replied, a faint smile breaking through. Historians aren't known for their daring exploits. Well, today you're rewriting the job description, John said, grabbing a nearby tablet. Let's start by pulling the raw logs from yesterday's interference. If we're lucky, we'll see a pattern, some kind of signature that gives us a lead. Mira stood, her confidence growing. You handle the extraction. I'll analyze the data. Between the two of us, we should find something. They worked side by side for hours, the quiet hum of the equipment their only background noise. As they sifted through the data, they exchanged observations, traded ideas, and occasionally shared a laugh when one of them made a particularly bad guess. This looks promising, Mira said at one point, pointing to a cluster of signals on the screen. See how these frequencies overlap? That's not random. It's a calculated pattern. John leaned over her shoulder, his brow furrowing in concentration. You're right, and it's repeating every 27 minutes. That's too regular to be natural. Exactly, Mira said. If we can isolate that pattern and compare it to known communication channels, we might find out who's behind it. John grinned. Told you you'd make a good investigator. Mira rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her smile. Let's see if we can narrow it down before you start giving me a badge. They continued their work, their collaboration growing more seamless with each passing hour. Myra's sharp analytical mind combined with John's knack for spotting strategic patterns made them an unexpectedly effective team. By late afternoon, they had their breakthrough. There, Mira said, pointing to a new data set. This code fragment matches a known signature from a rogue faction we've encountered before. They call themselves the Sectors, an offshoot of a once-respected interstellar council. John whistled softly. The Sectors. I've heard about them. Opportunistic, ruthless, and willing to do whatever it takes to push their agenda. Mira nodded. They've been trying to undermine Yalara's independence for years. If they're behind this, we need to act fast. John leaned back against the console, crossing his arms. And by act fast, you mean what? Reach out to your people? Confront the Sectors directly? Not directly, Mira said. But if we can warn the Yalaran Council and provide evidence of this interference, we can strengthen their position. Make it harder for the Sectors to spread their lies. John nodded, then looked at her seriously. You know this might not end with just words. If the Sectors push back, you'll need to be ready. I'll be ready, Mira said, meeting his gaze. And it's not just my fight. It's our fight now. Their eyes held for a moment before Mira broke the silence. So, what's our next move? John grinned. Simple. We get this evidence to your people. But first, we grab some coffee. I think we've earned it. Mira laughed. A genuine, light-hearted sound. You never change, do you? Not if I can help it, John said, already heading toward the door. Come on. Let's get to work. Chapter 7, The Bond. The air on the observation deck felt lighter, cleaner somehow. John leaned against the transparent barrier, staring out at the glittering expanse of space. Below him, Earth's continents glowed softly, a patchwork of civilization and wilderness. The quiet was a sharp contrast to the flurry of activity in the communication center earlier that day. Mira joined him, her footsteps nearly silent on the polished floor. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is," John agreed, though his gaze lingered on her rather than the planet. "Seeing it from up here, you realize how small we are, how much more is out there." Mira turned toward him, her features softening. "And yet, for something so small, it holds so much life, so many stories." "Yours included," John said. "Your story's part of it now." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Mira spoke again. "I never expected to find someone like you, John. When I crashed, I thought I'd be treated as an outsider, a problem to be solved." "You're not a problem," John said firmly. "You're a person who needed help, and now you're a friend." Mira smiled, the faint luminescence of her skin catching the ambient light. "A friend who's put you through a lot these past few weeks." He chuckled. "It's been an adventure, that's for sure, but I wouldn't trade it." They were interrupted by a chime from Myra's communicator. She checked the message, her expression shifting from contentment to concern. "What's wrong?" John asked. "It's from my council," she said. "They've reviewed the data we sent. They agree that the interference is a coordinated attack." "Then we've got confirmation," John said, straightening. "What's their next step?" "They want me to return and present our findings in person," Mira replied. "They need me to help them prepare a response." John nodded slowly. "I figured this day would come. When do you leave?" "Soon," she said. "They're sending a ship to pick me up tomorrow." He looked back out at Earth, his hands gripping the railing. "Guess this is goodbye, then." Mira stepped closer. "John, I don't want it to be goodbye." He turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I want you to come with me," Mira said. "You've been by my side through all of this. You've helped me when I had no one else. I can't imagine continuing without you." John's breath caught. He hadn't expected this. "You want me to go to Yalara?" Mira nodded. "It wouldn't be easy. You'd be far from everything you know. But you'd be with me." He rubbed the back of his neck, torn between loyalty to his home and the connection he'd found with Mira. "I don't know what I'd do on Yalara." "You'd find your place," Mira said, "just as you've found it here with me." He looked into her eyes, feeling the pull of something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He reached out, taking her hand. "Mira, Before he could finish, she stepped closer, her other hand brushing lightly against his cheek. It was the briefest of touches, but it sent a jolt through him, more powerful than any words. Slowly, cautiously, he leaned in, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that felt both inevitable and extraordinary. When they broke apart, Myra's eyes were brighter than ever. "Come with me, John. Let's find out what's next. Together." He exhaled, his mind racing. But as he looked at her, he realized there was no real decision to be made. He'd already chosen. "All right," he said. "I'm with you." Chapter 8. New Dawn. The Yalaran ship hovered silently above the city, its sleek, aquatic-inspired design casting soft reflections on the water below. John stood on the open platform of the craft, the earth shrinking beneath them as they ascended into the stars. Beside him, Mira gazed at her home planet's faint glow in the distance, her expression both wistful and determined. "How long until we reach Yalara?" John asked, leaning against the rail. Mira glanced at the readout on her wrist console. "A few hours. The journey's not far by our standards." John nodded, taking in the vastness of the cosmos stretching before them. "It still feels unreal. Not long ago, I thought I'd never leave Earth again, never be part of something like this. And now you are," Mira said gently. "And you're not alone." They exchanged a small smile before the ship's captain, a tall, willowy Yalaran with silver-blue skin, approached. "We've cleared the local patrols. All is proceeding as planned." "Thank you, Captain Lion," Mira replied. The captain turned to John, studying him briefly. "You're the human who helped uncover the interference?" "I guess you could say that," John replied. Mira and I worked on it together. Then you'll be a guest of honor when we arrive, Lion said. Our people value cooperation, and your efforts have not gone unnoticed. John glanced at Mira. No pressure, right? She smiled, placing a hand lightly on his arm. You'll be fine. As they traveled, Mira took John through a crash course on Yalaran culture, offering insights into their political structure, art forms, and philosophies. They sat side by side in the observation lounge, the faint hum of the ship's engines a comforting backdrop. You'll meet the council members as soon as we land, Mira explained. Some of them are traditionalists. They may be cautious about involving an outsider. I'll just have to charm them with my wit and rugged good looks, John said, earning a soft laugh from Mira. They do appreciate sincerity, she added, her smile lingering. Just be yourself. Not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, he teased. The ship began its descent onto Yalara, the floating cities coming into view like luminous islands drifting on an endless ocean. Their lights shimmered against the water's surface, connected by elegant energy bridges that pulsed gently in the night. John stood at the window, awestruck. It's like something out of a dream. Mira joined him, her expression proud yet humble. This is my home. I've missed it. They landed on a wide platform surrounded by a welcoming committee of Yalaran officials and council members. The atmosphere was formal yet not unfriendly. As they stepped off the ship, John felt the weight of curious gazes upon him. The council leader, a stately Yalaran woman named Orin, approached. Her long, flowing robes shimmered in the city's light, and her presence commanded respect. She addressed Mira first. Historian Mira, we are pleased you have returned safely. Your findings have been invaluable. Mira inclined her head. Thank you, Counselor Orin. I bring more than just findings. John, the human who aided me, is here as well. Orin turned her attention to John, her expression reserved but not hostile. John, we have heard much about your efforts. You helped us uncover the source of the interference. For that, we are grateful. John nodded respectfully. It was a team effort. Mira and I worked together. I just did what I could to help. Orin studied him for a moment longer before her demeanor softened. Then you are welcome here. Our discussions will begin shortly. In the meantime, you may explore our city and learn more of our ways. The meeting with the council took place in a grand chamber overlooking the ocean. Mira presented the data, her voice steady and confident as she detailed the interference pattern, the sector's involvement, and the risks her people faced. John stood by her side, offering additional context when needed. As the council deliberated, John and Mira found themselves back on a quiet terrace, the city lights reflecting off the water below. The tension from the meeting slowly faded as they sat together on a curved bench. You were impressive in there, John said. They really listen to you. They listen because they know the truth is vital, Mira said. And because they see I'm not alone in this. Your presence strengthens our case. I'm just here to back you up, John said with a shrug. And you did, Mira replied. She hesitated, then added, John, I'm glad you came with me. He turned to her, meeting her luminous gaze. So am I. Mira reached out, her fingers lightly brushing his. They sat in silence for a moment, the connection between them unspoken but undeniable. For John, it was a turning point, not just in their mission but in his own understanding of what he wanted. And he knew now, without a doubt, that he'd found it.